The heat seemed to press down on him like an old grudge, suffocating and unforgiving. The writer stood in the foyer of his childhood home, feeling the weight of years hanging in the stagnant air. His father's house always held a certain warmth, but today it bore down on him with an intensity that made his shirt stick to his back. His gaze floated over the familiar landscape of worn-out furniture, scuffed linoleum floor, and walls adorned with family pictures. Each object whispered tales of time spent, love shared, dreams pursued, and lost, in this very space. These echoes tugged at his heartstrings like plucking notes on a well-worn guitar. He swallowed hard against the lump forming in his throat, physical evidence of emotional baggage he'd been carting around for far too long. He looked toward the darkened living room where shadows danced wildly as if mocking him. They cloaked his father reclining in his chair, a sanctuary where he'd fall asleep watching reruns of black and white sitcoms, and once upon a time read the fledgling works of a budding writer with a kind smile on his weathered face. Turning away from the ghosts lurking in corners, he picked up an old picture frame resting on a dust-covered table. The photograph inside was faded, but its memory fresh as morning dew in his mind. In it were two young men. One was himself looking awkwardly handsome in a graduation cap and gown while holding tightly onto another man's hand, an intimate detail unnoticed by most but painfully clear to those who dared to see. It was Evan. The name was like a beautiful melody played on shattered glass, each note vibrant yet agonizing. His college roommate turned lover, who breathed life into his words and fire into their forbidden love story beneath starlit skies and within ancient library walls. A relationship so profound yet deemed unnatural by society's norms, mostly by his father's. He felt the rush of his pulse in his veins, a thunderous drum echoing the internal conflict that had been his companion for years. He was a writer who had learned to narrate others' stories seamlessly, yet he'd been too afraid to pen down his own, an account stained with longing, fear, and an ache for acceptance. From the confines of his mind and the depths of his heart, he summoned Evan's memory, the curl of his smile, the warmth of his touch. He remembered how they laughed as they danced clumsily on their dorm room carpet one night, how Evan's eyes sparkled brighter than any star he had ever seen, how their bodies entwined in a dance as old as time itself, a declaration made in whispers and sealed with hushed kisses. His hands trembled slightly as he traced the contours of their interlocked fingers within the photograph. The texture was smooth beneath his touch, but it scraped against his soul like sandpaper. It was more than just a picture. It was proof that once upon a time, under this very roof, amid familial duties and societal expectations, two souls had dared to love freely, even if from behind closed doors. The sound of footsteps brought him back to reality, a bitter pill to swallow after losing himself in sweeter memories. His father stood at the entrance of the living room, silhouetted by dim light. His eyes filled with an unspoken mix of surprise and curiosity. As their gazes met across the room steeped in history and half-truths, an invisible line seemed to stretch taut between them, a chasm formed by silence that needed crossing. It was not just about telling a father about his son's love for another man. It was about revealing an identity hidden beneath layers of fear and pretense. With each second ticking away, tension hung heavy in the air like a foggy dawn awaiting sunlight's embrace. The story was yet to be written, the words yet to be spoken, a potent mixture of hope, fear, and silent pleas for understanding. And in that single heartbeat, trapped between nostalgia and anticipation, the writer knew that he was on the precipice of penning the most challenging narrative of his life, one filled with love, heartache, and a desire to be seen for who he truly was. The cold air whispered against his skin, a cruel mimicry of her touch, chilling his exposed arms as he sat alone on the porch. Winter had come to call, lacing the world in frost and biting winds. But all the writer could feel was an aching hollowness that echoed where she used to be. Her perfume still lingered in the air, jasmine and vanilla intermingled with memories of warm summer nights, stolen kisses under starlit skies, clandestine meetings in moonlit groves. Each breath drew her closer, yet pushed him further into the abyss of longing. He closed his eyes, pain etched into the lines on his face like deep grooves on an old vinyl record, memories playing over and over in discordant symphony. The life they dreamed of, a house filled with laughter and warmth, children running wild through verdant fields, passionate love made under soft cotton sheets, now felt like shards of glass piercing his heart. His father's words echoed in his mind, "Love is not for us." He was a stern man, bound by tradition, principles hammered into him from birth like nails into wood. The writer remembered how he recoiled when he first confessed about his forbidden love, not at the person but at the profession. Love a commoner? His father's disdain was palpable, as if he touched something untoward. Every moment since then had been a dance along the razor's edge, balancing between rebellion and acquiescence, between love's sweet promise and duty's harsh demand. But love was no match for obligation. It never stood a chance. His fingers brushed against a last letter left behind, scrawled words of farewell on aged parchment that felt rough under his trembling touch, just like their story, raw and unfinished. "I cannot bear your absence any longer," she wrote. "I'd rather bleed from saying good-bye than wither from your silence." Her scent was on the letter too, and it gutted him, ripped his insides until there was nothing left but an echo of their love. His heart pounded in his chest, a lone soldier marching against an empty battlefield. He rose from the porch chair, bones aching with weariness that had nothing to do with cold. He walked back into their empty home, a mausoleum of love's lost promise. The frost-kissed windows reflected his pale face, a man ravaged by love, haunted by memories. The sharp sting of winter wind against his skin felt kinder now, almost a balm to the raw wounds inside him. Perhaps in time he would come to terms with her departure, perhaps even find solace in its numbness. But for now, all he had was silent echoes of her touch in the frost-bitten air, and the sweet agony of their love story written in jasmine and vanilla-scented pages. Perhaps that would have to be enough. The study was suffused with the smoky scent of Dad's old cigars, a poignant reminder of years past. The writer, fingertips trembling against the worn mahogany desk, held her breath as if absorbing the room's history through osmosis. This place, this heart of their home, was steeped in ink and secrets, silent testimonies to the forbidden love shared between her and him. Dad, from his armchair across the room, watched her with an intensity that made her insides twist. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her like a physical presence. His eyes were always so emotionally eloquent. Their love was a language spoken in stolen glances and lingering touches, in coded words scribed into clandestine letters. She remembered how she'd shivered under his touch for the first time, how heat had pooled low in her belly despite the biting winter outside. Love had blossomed then amidst whispered promises and stolen kisses under moonlight, guarded by frost-rimmed windows. It became their secret garden, flourishing yet hidden away from prying eyes. Now, spring had come again to find them still captivated by each other, two hearts bound in forbidden romance, love embedded as deeply as the roots of the ancient oak outside their window. Yet nothing beautiful can remain hidden forever. "Audrey," Dad said softly, breaking the silence that lay heavy between them. His voice was gravelly with emotion, regret or remorse. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, a telltale sign he was fighting back tears. She turned towards him, eyes alight with concern. "What is it?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, drinking in every detail as if committing it to memory, her dark curls falling loose around her shoulders, framing a face full of unspoken questions, blue eyes mirroring his own, sparkling with love and fear intertwined. We can't keep this," he choked on the words. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles white against the worn leather of his armchair. She felt a frigid wave of realization wash over her. The taste of their impending separation was like ash in her mouth. Every memory, every stolen moment, suddenly held a new weight. "I know," she said softly, feeling her own tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Their secret garden was wilting, their love story becoming an elegy whispered between crumbling walls. Yet amidst the coming storm, they found solace in each other's arms one last time, the scent of old cigars and fresh ink merging with their shared sorrow, a painful reminder of what they were about to lose. As they parted, both knew that nothing would ever be the same again, their love story etched into the annals of forbidden romances, beautiful yet tragic. In the ensuing silence, one thing rang clear. Their love may have been forbidden, but it was also undeniably real. And sometimes, even love stories without happy endings are worth telling. The final note of the piano piece hung in the air, thin and crystal-like in its fragility. It reverberated through the room, a tiny cry that echoed from the high ceiling. The dad felt it shiver down his spine, melting like ice into his bloodstream. His daughter's composition, their secret language made audible for anyone with ears to hear. Across the room, the writer was still as a sketch, her hands hovering over her notebook as if she could catch each note with her pen and trap them on paper. She was trying to keep her part of the secret, falling in love with a man who belonged to someone else. His wife, her mother. A surge of warmth flushed across his face as he locked eyes with her. He had never intended for this, their mutual admiration spilling into something deeper, forbidden. But here they were, in that space where silence writhed with words left unspoken and glances spoke volumes more than pages filled to brimming. He took a step towards her, a dance they had been doing for too long now. The smell of old paper and ink filled his nostrils, an olfactory testament of their shared moments, stolen away from prying eyes. Her scent clung to him like an indelible mark, a tangible reminder that only heightened their complex relationship. In that fleeting moment, they stood suspended between shared memories and potential futures, their past decisions converging into this single point of tension, tightrope walkers inching across emotions stretched taut like wire under their bare feet. As he neared her, he could see tiny beads of sweat on her forehead, a physical embodiment of inner turmoil. He reached out tentatively, every detail about her etched onto the landscape of his heart, each line written by his fingers tracing over hers, every phrase punctuated by stolen kisses, each chapter marked by hushed whispers after twilight, every paragraph colored with the weight of their transgressions. In the burning silence, he whispered, "We can't continue like this." Each word fell heavily onto the silence. She flinched, her heartstrings echoing with the same pitch of pain. Her lips trembled as she gathered herself. "I know," she breathed out. Her pen dropped onto her notebook, splattering ink like tiny tears. The room cooled as the echoes of their words faded into nothingness, a void opening between them, a palpable distance that dwarfed their physical proximity. The story they had written together ended there, unfinished symphony, unsent letters, an incomplete book whose last pages would remain unwritten. Tears welled up in both their eyes, prisms refracting the light around them. They held each other's gaze a moment longer before turning away, their connection severed by an unvoiced understanding. Beneath her father's love and her lover's longing, the writer found herself alone, a lone figure etching the resolution to a tale spun from forbidden threads. A tale that had now ended, its melody swallowed by silence, its characters wrenched apart by circumstance and duty. Their love story was over, the final chapter closed, but within her heart and on those smeared pages of ink and tear stains, their tale would live on, an eternal testament to a love that bloomed in forbidden soil, vibrant yet tragic in its silent beauty.